All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is over. Finally, the streak is over. The skid is over. Texas A&M wins a road game for the first time since October 2021, the week after the Aggies defeated Alabama, with defensive coordinator Mike Elko on the staff. Devon Achane, we were still calling him Devon Achane. Isaiah Spiller was scoring touchdowns. It has been so long, and Texas A&M finally gets the job done Saturday, taking down the Florida Gators 33-20. Welcome into All In Aggies. I'm Ben Peck, your host, to break down this game to you. Apologize for this not getting out earlier. My plan was we had the Florida game at 2:30. I, for my day job purposes, had to cover the Baylor Air Force game at 6:30. I was going to try to put up a mini reaction afterwards, but with the rain delay and everything else, I didn't get back. I didn't have that window available to me. Didn't get back until about 1 a.m. So I figured at that point, just let it marinate, let you enjoy your NFL Sunday, and then let's regather, reassess what went down in the swamp on Saturday in Gainesville. Number one, first thing, obviously, Marcel Reed, the title of the video, and that's the biggest thing we're going to be getting into here. 33-20, the final. Marcel looked great. To come in on, I say relatively short notice, but it sounded like as of Thursday, when some stuff developed, that became a real possibility. And I think everyone was aware going into the weekend that was in the program that this could happen, was likely to happen, somewhere along those lines. So Marcel Reed kind of picked up where he left off. I thought it was tremendously impressive what he did in the Texas Bowl, given the circumstances of coming in almost immediately for Jalen Henderson in that game and showing out the way he did. You can tell he's a professional in terms of how he prepares and gets ready for the assignment if and when his number needs to be called upon. So before I get into a breakdown of the game too far, I want to just point out some breadcrumbs of things of how this makes a lot more sense, some of the stuff leading up to this point in terms of Connor Wigman. We have been begging on this show for a while for downfield passing. And I'm not asking for 4 verts. I'm not asking all the time or crazy air raid offense, but just a little bit of versatility, a little bit of difference of options in terms of how you can attack offenses. If you're just doing run game, slants, crossing routes, just nickel and diamond people, it's a tough way to make a living. We got to be able to stretch the field at peak efficiency. Now this makes a lot more sense. If Connor Wigman not only was hurt and not available for Florida, he got injured during the Notre Dame game, during the touchdown run where Texas A&M scored late in the game to tie the game. So from that point on, limited in terms of his shoulder. It's a shoulder, his AC joint. I believe it's a sprain. Could be back soon, which we'll get into that discussion, which direction A&M should go as well. But Connor Wigman, not effective against Notre Dame. I think still most of that had to do with the defense. It maybe explains a little bit of the final few drives there. And then McNeese State, we said, listen, he was really good, efficient. PFF had him as the highest graded out player in the country, 11 for 14, but the yardage wasn't particularly impressive, if we're being honest. Not that he was making bad decisions, 11 for 14, 2 touchdowns. So he was doing a good job in that sense, but we weren't stretching the field. We weren't seeing the Aggies stretch the field. This makes sense. If he was dealing with an AC situation, last game, the entire game, granted, manageable enough to get through it, that makes sense. And we talked to you about it's McNeese State. You don't want to throw everything out there if you don't have to. Keep things a little close to the vest. And when Marcel Reed got in there, I believe in Coach Elko's words, this past Saturday, kind of acknowledged, we wanted to give him some reps with the ones anyway, but, we kind of obviously were just getting through the game, took the air out of the ball a little bit. Even yesterday did the same thing. So it kind of limited your knowledge or what you could learn from him in that situation going through that. But I want to take you back before we get back to Florida. This was the question I asked Mike Elko, the full exchange, in regards to this is after Notre Dame, before McNeese State. How are you guys going to move the ball down the field vertically this year more than you did against Notre Dame? And now with the understanding of Connor Wigman's injury situation, this makes a lot more sense, much more sense.
Coach, just to the passing game, what do you feel like is the key for maybe some of the biggest things for y'all to be able to create options at all three levels in terms of, short, intermediate, and deep passing game? I know you said y'all were trying to get into a rhythm with Connor, but I guess just to keep defenses honest so they're not just, going for the short stuff. To be able to pass the ball down the field more.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out. No, you're good. I'm just trying to figure out how to answer that. I think we've got to be more multiple in how we attack people. I think part of that is trusting the protection. Part of that is delivering the ball where it's supposed to go. Some of that is us schematically creating better opportunities to push the ball down the field. I guess that's the best way to answer that.
Trying to think of how I should answer this. That's the best way to answer that. Well, now that makes a lot more sense because he couldn't tell you, well, Connor's hurt right now. His shoulder's a little sore. We're not going to stretch him out, especially against McNeese State, and have him throwing bombs for no reason if his shoulder's hurting. Now that makes sense as to why we had maybe a little trouble thinking of how to answer that question. I'm not blaming Mike Elko. Like, I'd do the same thing, but it's just like all the pieces are aligning together. We talked about even Friday before the game. It was interesting. At that point, the news that might be a possibility kind of came out. But at that point, it was like, well, that's interesting that Marcel Reed was out there with the rest of the ones before, everyone else came off. Anyways, you get what I'm saying. It makes a lot more sense now based on what we saw Saturday or what ended up happening Saturday with Connor Wigman sitting out. Okay, so I guess that brings up the big question. 33-20. Marcel Reed's final numbers, 11 for 17, buck 78, 2 touchdowns, 13 for 83 with a touchdown on the ground. Should the Aggies move in this direction long term? Should the Aggies if Connor Wigman is available, should the Aggies still turn to Marcel Reed? I think I'm going to buck what seems to be popular opinion and say, at this moment, I would not make the switch. That is not a shot at Marcel Reed. I thought he played phenomenal. I mean, if you know you're going to get that every week, you'll take it. Like, there's nothing wrong with what he did at all. But I am curious, knowing that the tail end of the Notre Dame game and the entire McNeese State game, Connor Wigman was limited. And, I guess it is fair to say, is that a type of injury or something that he's going to have to play through the rest of the year and he's never going to be 100% quote unquote in that regard? Maybe. I'm not sure. Or it could get re-aggravated. They have setbacks, as was what happened leading up to the Florida game, which led to Marcel Reed playing in the first place. Could be. So, I mean, if Connor Wigman, I guess, is never going to be 100% healthy the rest of the year anyway, then that would make the rest of my point kind of a moot point. But assuming you can get a relatively healthy Connor Wigman, I still would like to see what he could do in this offense before I totally move on, jump ship, and say it's time to put in Marcel Reed full-time, put in 10. We're quick to forget Connor Wigman in the time that he did play was fantastic, very good, showed lots of upside. I think that's still in there. So, I want to see how he can, like I said, come together with the full game plan realistically as an option for him in that position. Now, having said all that, I don't think right now that should be the move if and when Connor Wigman becomes available. I think you still roll with Connor Wigman. Little twist on that is I don't know long-term that that you do go to Connor Wigman. Long term, by the end of the season, I think it might be in your best interest to have Marcel Reed. And in terms of big picture within this offense, who operates this offense at highest peak efficiency? I think I would maybe lean towards Marcel Reed in terms of at the end of the year, what should we see? What will we see? All this stuff. All I'm saying is before you make that switch, I don't want to see Connor Wigman go out there and be awful and lose games and then you begrudgingly go to it. But I do think he's played well enough in the past to still give him a chance. I mean, give him a chance. I mean, he played very well last game. He played better than Marcel Reed against McNeese State. Not to say Marcel Reed played terrible, and again, that had a lot to do with time and score and everything else. But I think, 24 hours later, as I sit here recording this, I understand the excitement, the potential, the athleticism for Marcel Reed, but it wasn't enough in my mind to say, just go ahead and make the switch absolutely immediately long term. I think what this does for you, though, is you say, if Connor Wigman, if you find yourself in a game and the passing, just the offense in general, is not clicking, the rhythm's not there, you're in a little bit of a rut, I think you have a lot more confidence to more quickly go to Marcel Reed to get you through that game and see if that opens up some stuff. And that, in my mind, is how I see any transition from Connor Wigman to Marcel Reed working out in the future. I don't think it's going to be one of these things where unless Marcel Reed, if Connor's out for several weeks and Marcel Reed is rolling and continues to play very well, but it must be said too, like he played very, very well against Florida, but this was not like a DJ Lagway against Samford-esque performance. It was, 178 yards, 11 for 17, 2 touchdowns, picked up some yards with his legs, mobility. That's great. I'm saying it would be harder for me to say that you don't go back to Wigman if and when he's available, if Marcel Reed comes out here and is looking like a reincarnation of just trying to think back to maybe like a Jameis Winston, how he came in and just from the get-go just played phenomenal, or Johnny Heck just played phenomenal from all the way through, and you say you're going to take that guy out. Not that Jameis was in a position battle. I can't think of a good analogy. Apologies for that, but I don't know. I think you still roll with Connor, but you've seen enough from Marcel to feel very good that if you ever find yourself in trouble, you can go to Marcel much quicker than you would have in the past. So, like, for example, I think if you knowing what you know now, knowing what we saw from Marcel Reed against Florida, if you were replaying the Notre Dame game today and the offense was in a rut, I think you probably would put Marcel Reed in at some point in that game, as opposed to saying this is Connor's team, Connor's game. He's our quarterback one, no questions. I think now, having seen that, you say, okay. The other thing that makes me cautious, not nervous, but cautious, is this was against Florida, and as I said Friday, there's a chance Florida's just really bad. I mean, the two touchdowns they gave up were terrible to Cyrus Allen, who was not the main option on that play, and the defender just stopped running with him. And then Theo is wide open right down the middle of the field. And they're big chunk plays too. So that makes me think good on Marcel for taking advantage of dumb plays, bad decisions, which is honestly a huge part of being a successful quarterback, especially in college. So good on him for doing that. But can he do a better job than Wigman if you're playing a team that is fundamentally sound, that is not giving up these wide open things, and you need to be like they're not going to give you double faults and unforced errors to be able to chip away. You're going to have to just be better than your good has to be better than their good. If that's the case, I still want to see if Connor Wigman can come through with that. That being said, Sorry, this is like the ultimate caveat episodes. That being said, and everything else. Marcel Reed, another thing that I liked with what I see, speaking of those two plays, the Theo play went down every progression, found him at the end. Cyrus Allen, he talked about it post-game. I would run some post-game sound, but the quality that we got was not great. So just going to kind of relay whatever comes to mind. The Cyrus Allen touchdown, he rolls to his left. The play is really there for the flat. The guy's there in the flat. That's like the first option, and he's there. But to have the wherewithal to see my guy's coming wide open, I'm going to, process that play and do that. That shows incredible maturity in terms of on-field maturity in my mind, and speaks very well of him that it's not just as opposed to a situation where maybe your first read, your first look is Theo down the middle and he's wide open and you throw it. That's one thing. But to get there when it's not your first read, or when your first read is actually there, but you still happen to have the wherewithal to see that, love it, right? Fantastic. And again, I feel really good about the quarterback situation moving forward. I think if Wigman is back and he can operate at a good level for him, see what can happen. I think he's been, it's maybe not as natural, not as smooth, but in terms of him moving, being a mobile quarterback, but I think he offers you enough of that as a baseline to say he can be a successful, dangerous quarterback in this offense. I'd love to see if they're able to throw it down the field and not be limited, what that looks like. And then Marcel Reed, I do think it is absolutely fair to say, and actually I agree, that in terms of the Colin Klein system, Marcel Reed, just in terms of his archetype, is much better quarterback designed for the system. It's not even close, really, to be, in my estimation. It's not a knock on Connor. That's not to say Connor's not a better quarterback. Like I said, I think you go with Connor as long as you can for now before you make any type of switch. But, Marcel Reed is much more fluently mobile, and not even that, just he seems like he's more pocket. Let me think of it this way. Connor Wigman, I think, is at his best when he's in a clean pocket. He can certainly move around. You can move the pocket, but he's throwing darts. Marcel Reed can do that. He's got an arm. I think his arm is good, both accuracy and strength. But if you want to just do a naked rollout or some kind of crazy quarterback motion or even read option, the upside for that is way, way higher. I mean, we saw I can't remember if it was third down, that the scramble he had where he shook like two Florida defenders. You're not getting that from Connor Wigman. Love Connor Wigman. That's a Marcel Reed special. And so, yes, I think if we're starting from day one, Marcel Reed's maybe the guy. But given what we've seen from Connor, I'm not giving up on number 15. I want to see him not struggle before you make a switch, but I want to give him a chance to really play with the full deck against, a team that's maybe not quite at Notre Dame's level, to ease into it. That was a week one situation too. The rest of the guys are figuring stuff out. I want to see if the rest of the offense is functioning at a higher level, if he can maybe match that and maybe see where that potential is. Now, that said, if there's a cap on it, I think you go right back to Marcel Reed. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. I know it's kind of all over the place. I think you could make an argument. Like I said, I think Marcel Reed's better fit for the system. Connor Wigman, I think, has been good enough in the past. You go with him now. But Marcel Reed played great against Florida. I'm just nervous if Florida's really bad, and that is more to do with it than Marcel Reed being head and shoulders above Connor Wigman. I don't know. We shall see. We have a lot more answers, though. And just focusing on the rest of the game now, substantively, huge win for Mike Elko. This is as I tried to say before the season, I think it would be huge for A&M to have a needle mover of a season in terms of public perception, in terms of where A&M is and where they're going, and how far away they are from truly not just being a playoff team, but being a real contender in the playoffs, in the SEC, and becoming a destination for guys, not just in high school recruiting, but in the transfer portal to say, if Isaiah Bond wants, in let's say Alabama's timeline is 1 year delayed from where it is in reality, and we are in Nick Saban's final year right now, and then he leaves, and then Isaiah Bond were to enter the transfer portal after what would be this season, and you look at your options, he went to Texas because they have a great offense, they're moving, and they're a team that is potentially playing at a championship level. I want A&M to be playing at a level where, to those type of players who can see themselves as the final piece, as, a bona fide, proven commodity, and just wants to go to a program that's maybe a slightly better fit, or, a program that is close, maybe not quite, hasn't quite made it to championship level, but is closer to that than their previous institution, that they can look at A&M as that type of place. I pause to say, because I'm thinking, obviously that part of it did not apply to Alabama. That was a unique circumstance specifically with that. But I don't know. I just think you got to create buzz. You got to create substance, buzz, and excitement for all the right reasons, not for hype and shallow reasons, but for reasons that have to do with on the field, actually seeing it with your eyes, witnessing it. I always use the example of Tennessee 2 years ago when they beat Alabama, and Mizzou last year, not just beating Ohio State, but how they played the whole year. Those were seasons, I think, where, you see where Tennessee is now. It didn't quite materialize for them last year, but I think it started the process of people in their mind saying, okay, Tennessee with Josh Heupel might have to keep an eye on these guys. They seem like they got it going on. And at that point, they had Nico committed, signed. Like he was you knew that he was gonna be there. And then last year with Mizzou, how their production translated from last year to this year, people's expectations. I know they had crucial players return, Brady Cook and others, Luther Bolden, but I think A&M desperately needs to try to get into that group of teams, because if you're on the outside of it and you're waiting for other teams to slip up and stumble and for there to be an opening caused by them, like, create your own luck to get into that group. Don't just sit around and wait for Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, Texas eventually to all have down years and then strike because the rest of the league's kind of weak. Create your own luck. Put yourself in that conversation, at least on the radar of, hey, these guys are coming up and we got to be worried about them. And if you're a recruit and you're a transfer and you want to come in and do that, then you have a place to go. I think in order for A&M to do that, you probably need at least 9 wins. Maybe 9 wins without making the playoff can suffice in terms of that perception, both from fans, from players, everything else. Maybe it's got to be the playoffs. Maybe it's got to be 10 wins. Who knows? But my point in saying all that is I don't think any sort of scenario like that plays out if you lose to Florida and you fall to 1-2 and you put yourself in a position where you need to run the table pretty much the entire rest of the year in order for people to think of A&M as a program that not just one to keep an eye on, and maybe they can move the needle next season and then maybe the season after that. But no, like right now, they're at a competitive level to where you need to take notice. So there was that. Just a couple other quick notes about things I was really impressed with. We talked about needing to play from the front, play with the lead. obviously did that to a phenomenal level, limiting the big plays, taking the crowd out of it. No silly, stupid penalties. We still had some penalties. Penalties were not great in that category, but there were no back-breaking penalties that led to explosive plays or scores for Florida, at least at any point where it really mattered in the game. There were no turnovers that just rejuvenated Florida at all. I don't think they did not turn it over. I was just trying to remember. It's been a crazy 24 hours. No turnovers to get the swamp rocking. Did that great. Marcel Reed giving you options. I mean, the whole rushing attack, really. 310 yards, obviously. Amari Daniels looked good. E.J. Smith looked good when he came in. Le'Veon Moss goes without saying. Offensive line, obviously, I think has a lot to do with that because, I mean, obviously the offensive line, but if you're having multiple guys average, I mean, I'll just go down the list. Moss averaging 6.1 yards a carry. Reed, 6.4. Amari Daniels, 5.2. E.J. Smith, 4.0. No one's averaging less than 4 yards a carry on an individual basis among the running backs. That means your line's blocking well. Now, moving into Bowling Green. Just keep it going. We also saw some sacks. That was nice to see. Finally got home on a couple. Shamar Stewart, half a sack. Cassius Howell, saw him into Shields. By the way, Cassius Howell getting ready to play his former team, Bowling Green, next week. So that'll be exciting, a fun watch for that part of it. But feel very good to be an Aggie fan. And again, I just cover the team. I do have a lot of merch, but feel very good if I'm an Aggie fan. And with what I'm seeing, I think morale boost, that was huge for guys who've been – I mean, think of it. The guys who've been with the program as part of the 2022 signing class, that fabled class, they've never won a game on the road. So they finally get to do that. I think it was a professional win to deal with the rain, to deal with the delay, to come out, to not let the delay give them a chance to get life and come out with energy, to just take care of your business. That very good showing from the Aggies. 33-20, very encouraged. Marcel Reed, maybe by the end of the year, maybe he should be the quarterback. I don't think quite right now, not that he's not playing well enough. And if he did this, you could do it. But I would hate for a situation where you put Marcel Reed in there and you say, you're the guy, you're going to be the quarterback, and then he struggles, and then you put in Connor Wigman after you've hurt his confidence and he's been out of game action, and you try to get him to get going, and then he doesn't really work out, and you go, maybe, okay, do we go back tomorrow? That's the situation I want to avoid. So let Wigman go, and if he struggles, you've got Marcel Reed available. That's all we got for you today on All In Aggies. Again, apologies for the delay on getting this up there, but we had we all had a chaotic Saturday watching that game, and we're finally moving onward and upward. Bowling Green up next as the Aggies try to go to 3-1. Thank you so much for watching. Ben Peck here with All In Aggies. We will see you back on Monday.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.